Hi gang. So in this video, I am just going to be playing with some of my newer cosmetic items and just giving my thoughts on the current political climate that we're in the middle of at the moment. Okay, so uh, I did put on some makeup already. I went out. It was a hot day. I sweated, and therefore you can see a little bit of the lower lash line eyeshadow, especially on the corner. They kind of disappear. So for my look that I have on my eyes today, I used the Nomad by Juvia's Place, and this was a palette that I got in a makeup swap with Makeup by Algae MUA. I'll link a channel down below. I'm going to play a little bit with some of these other palettes as well. I might dip into this palette, the Violets, also by Juvia's Place, and Colored Rain Power. And yeah, let's just see what we get. Okay, so I think I want to take the shade Testify. I used this shade the other day and it was really pretty. So I want to try Testify on my outer corner just to play around with different shades. So at the moment, it's a little bit tense in terms of the political climate. And if you don't know what the situation is, you probably have not been engaging in the news or social media, things like that, because it seems to be popping up everywhere. It's hard to get away from. And honestly, I'm not that caught up on it because this past week, and including today as well, I've been trying to figure out my medication and sleeping patterns. My sleeping patterns have been disrupted. My focus and concentration have been affected. It hasn't been the most pleasant. And also because of that, my mood is affected, of course. And I feel lethargic. I feel sleepy. It's a bit of a mess. So I've been primarily more concerned with my own health. And that's another reason why I haven't been looking at social media too much. But I did see some posts here and there, and I did hear about the recent happenings through a few friends of mine. One is Samantha. She does watch my videos, so hi Samantha. And I think she brought it up like initially when everything had started, and when it started, I don't think people in Germany or outside the US really knew what was going on until the like big formal protests and the rioting, the marches in different countries has been happening. So yeah, from what I understand, there was a specific incident where a black man in the US was killed while he was being apprehended or being handcuffed or something like this. And if I'm not mistaken, he didn't actually do anything wrong. He was just suspected of doing something, using a counterfeit bill or something. And he was pushed to the ground, and he was telling the officers that he couldn't breathe, but the officer who was in immediate contact with him kind of like was putting a lot of pressure on him, on his back, and as a result, this man died. This incident the spark that ignited all these happenings in terms of protests, in terms of raising awareness about unfair treatment of certain ethnic groups in various countries. And I think it's been building up for a while because I know that a lot of people have not been happy having Donald Trump as a US president, my American friends. And also people that are not American themselves, they don't like him, they don't like his policies, they don't like what he stands for. At least the people that I interact with typically are more anti-Trump, let's just say that. So I personally am not American. I've never been to America. I come from a country which is very different in terms of the way that things are done. Protests are illegal in Singapore. And if you do want to say something, you can. However, you need to register. You have to go to a specific place, and then you can speak. But you also have to submit a copy of what you want to say in order to be able to have that space and speak your mind. So there's a lot of censorship in Singapore. It has been that way for a long time. And this is since our independence, because prior to this, we were ruled by Britain. We were under colonial rule, under British colonial rule. And after that, there was a political party that came into power, and they saw fit that our system be very controlled and very, how you say? Well, okay, I wouldn't say it was controlled all the way from the beginning. I mean, there was a lot of unrest. We also had things like race riots, something called the Maria Hertog riots. So anyway, this is a different scenario, but we have seen our unrest in Singapore's past. I personally have not gone through a period where there has been violent unrest. I've never experienced it in Singapore, and over here in Germany, where I am now, I have seen peaceful protests. I have seen people marching, people talking with the megaphone and trying to get their message out there. I have not personally participated in anything, and this is also partially because of my upbringing, and I mean, because it's illegal. From where I come from, it's illegal. So if I do have something to say, I say it in a more physically removed fashion. I believe that this movement, it has had its momentum for a while, the Black Lives Matter movement, but at the moment it's kind of resurfaced and things are getting more intense, and I think that has been accumulation of tension building from the time that Trump started being sworn into office, and his policies and his rhetoric and his statements and his claims and the way he deals with the public, the way he deals with other countries, the way he conducts himself generally. And then the COVID thing happened, where people have been, I don't know specifically about certain US states. I really am not that well versed in what's going on in different US states. I don't come from there, and I don't seek out that information. But I assume there has been some sort of lockdown in certain states, probably, and I assume that also brought up questions about healthcare, which is a big concern among US citizens. At least that's what I understand. Healthcare, unemployment, access to resources, things like that. So I think because of all of this and people kind of reflecting when they can, when they have this chance to reflect about the situation going on, because of the lockdown measures and things like that, it's not much other distraction that you can look for. I think that has kind of given rise to this resentment. And yeah, it happened that this particular incident, which is the George Floyd incident, has sparked major outrage, and similarly in different countries across the world. And in Singapore, we're not protesting in the marching manner. I know that some Singaporeans have taken to social media to express their support, and have posted their feelings about it, have tried to raise awareness about the issue. So in Singapore, we don't have we have a very, very small population of people of African descent. However, there are minority ethnic groups that live in Singapore, and it also is differentiated by kind of the immigrant status, because there are a portion of foreign workers that are designated to lower skilled level jobs, and these people come primarily from India. And recently it's been more brought up about their living conditions, especially because of COVID, and having taking care of our foreign workers' health, because health, that's what I meant, health, because they essentially provide all the manual labor for our infrastructure. The sentiment is that they don't have proper living conditions, and they're not paid very well, and they are also stigmatized and looked down upon because they are doing manual labor. However, no Singaporean wants to be a construction worker. So what you gonna do? If you want the comfort, don't. It's a little bit upsetting. Anyway, so in that sense, people have been talking about Chinese privilege, and this doesn't just refer to the power imbalance between the Singaporean Chinese and the migrant construction workers that come into Singapore. It also talks about the people that have been living in Singapore, because we do have other ethnicities that live in Singapore besides just Chinese. A point that's being brought up is that in Singapore there's Chinese privilege because of the Mandarin language, for one. Another thing is just stigmatization of other ethnicities, where certain ethnicities are labeled as lazy or not hardworking, etc., etc. And I think it's primarily because of this idea of meritocracy that has been fed to us. Singapore is very fair. If you work hard, you'll get somewhere. But obviously, there is no place that's perfect, and there's no place where injustice does not exist, and prejudice doesn't exist, and discrimination doesn't exist. So I think it's damaging to preach meritocracy if there is already structural inf- structural imbalances and institutional racism, let's just say that. So I understand that people are very upset with the current situation. Um, they are very upset with the history of discrimination and violence perpetrated upon a certain group of people in a disproportionate way. At instance, I'm talking about um, America and the law enforcement officers and how they are more suspicious of Black Americans, African Americans versus Caucasian Americans, and having harsher penalties for African Americans as opposed to white Americans for similar crimes. And yeah, and I can I can only imagine, because I don't actually have an experience of living in that prejudice, because I am a Chinese female. I present as very non-threatening by the way, just by my physique, my mannerisms, the way I choose to express the way I move, the way I dress, everything about me seems, I assume, non-threatening, especially in Germany. And in Singapore, I haven't had issues with law enforcement. The only encounters I've had is if I've seeked out law enforcement to aid me, to help me. So if I had a problem, I go to law enforcement. Um, so yeah, I'm not on the receiving end of the like suspicion of doing criminal activity and things like that. In Germany, I also have not had experiences of being suspected of a crime. I have been subjected to kind of racial or ethnic prejudices from just the general population, but I have not experienced like being under suspicion of anything. So that is not, I don't get it. And I recall having a conversation with someone a while back who is male and who is white, or who is Caucasian, and he was of the opinion that, it doesn't really, like, over here in the West, these, in his perspective, like, it's not really an issue, and he was very skeptical that it was that big of an issue. He knows that, he's aware that these things happen, but thinks that they are a little bit less hyped up, um, less of a problem that it is made out to be. And I think it's because of our lived experiences. If we don't have people in our peer group who have different experiences from us and share those experiences with us, then we don't know what's going on with, how they live their lives, if they live their lives in fear. And I would say something, I would liken it to this situation where my friend and I, both of us are females, were talking to a male friend of ours, and we were saying how, yes, when we were younger, we got molested by strangers. Someone touched our butt, that kind of thing, right? And for us, it's kind of like an accepted, like, that's probably going to happen to you if you're a female. It's very common. It's not anything shocking, but he was taken aback because he didn't realize that it was so prevalent. And that's probably because we never spoke about it with him openly, or it just didn't come up in conversation. And I assume that for certain minority groups, whether it be because you are a female and you just don't want to talk about um, sexual harassment or sexual abuse or sexual assault, these kinds of things, in front of guys that will like say, is it really that big of a deal, that kind of thing. Or if you are of a minority ethnicity and you face some sort of discrimination or prejudice from co-workers, from superiors, from professors, from teachers, from just the general public, like those experiences are not highlighted. And I think it's just because we don't like to bring up unpleasant things unless it really bothers us and we want to let our peer group know, okay, there's something bothering me and I need some sort of emotional support. So, and some things you just are private with. You don't really want the whole world to know about this. And for some people, it's just a matter of getting through life with as little drama as possible. If you are being harassed on a daily basis and you're just tired of having to deal with it, you depending on who you are as an individual and your kind of personality, maybe you just don't want to talk about it at all. You don't want to bring it up. You don't, that's just one part of your life and you just want to get on with life and go on and enjoy the parts of life that you can without bringing it up in conversations with friends who might judge you or doubt you or like question, was it really that bad? And then you have to explain, and then it gets tiring and it stresses you out, and you just don't want to have any of that. You just want to enjoy the company of people and not bring up unpleasantness. So that could be a method of coping. Or you might be a person that's very vocal about these situations and want to express them a lot on social media, maybe with friends. And sometimes that may kind of rub people the wrong way in this, depending on who they are, depending on their own experiences. Some people just don't want to hear it and say you're too whiny and like say, I really don't want to hear this anymore. And then there'll be some people that are very understanding and want to hear what you have to say. But to a certain extent, I think all of us get fatigued by the news, by the media, whether it be about COVID, about certain unrests going on. I think for the most part, eventually we all get fatigued. We all get fatigued with the influx of information. And on the other side of things, this particular movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, is bringing up the issue that for certain people, for a certain group of people, they are disproportionately harassed, disproportionately suspected of committing crimes when just because of how they appear, how they present themselves, and how they intrinsically just appear because of the shade of their skin. And it's frustrating, and therefore it's manifesting in, for some people, peaceful protests. For some people, it is more aggressive, more violent form of protest. But then there are also people which I think have taken it to an unnecessary place where you're just stealing. You're just taking advantage of the situation. You are taking advantage of the the disorder, the chaos that's going around. and damaging private property, damaging store owners' property, and stealing items, stealing merchandise, which is not right. I don't think it's right. So I really wish that all of this could come to a peaceful conclusion. I think there will be an amount of time where people continue to be frustrated and outraged and continue these protests. And I think eventually there will be a point of fatigue where everyone is kind of tired and they can't anymore, and slowly the enthusiasm and the waves of support kind of, I wouldn't say fade, but subside. And yeah, I also think that with this COVID thing around, I know people are wearing masks as they protest and things like that, but I still don't think it's the best for, at least, yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to be in mass gatherings because of the COVID that's going around. And I hope that those people that do go out are not in a compromised health situation, having asthma or whatever, or just being of an older generation or having pre-existing health conditions that might make you more susceptible to contracting COVID-19. So yeah, I personally have not been in a situation where it was all out chaos, all out rioting. I've never been in that situation. I don't know what it's like. I've never lived in a neighborhood where violence is rampant. So that's not my experience. I can only hope that if you watch this for whatever reason, and you are for whatever reason affected by these issues, I hope that you can remain safe, and I hope that things calm down. And I hope that the circumstances of minority groups shift and change in a positive way, where there is more fair and equal treatment in terms of passing sentences for criminals, in terms of suspecting people of committing crimes, in terms of use of force, of physical force to apprehend someone or to subdue someone. I hope that people can be more open to listening to the stories of others who have a different lived experience. Be more cognizant of the way that your life could be different based on the advantages you have as a human being, for whatever reason, whether you come from a wealthier family, whether you have more access to education, whether you come from a country, for instance, that has a very strong passport, access to healthcare, access to basic shelter, basic needs, these kinds of things. So things that are invisible, such as achieving promotion in a workplace environment, being stereotyped at work, being denied certain opportunities because of your, for instance, gender expression. Yeah, many many aspects. So I know this is a heavy topic. It's a lot to unpack. I know this has been very rambly. If you have an differing opinions, if you have something to say, if you have something that you want to get off your chest, please leave it in the comments below, just as long as you are not disrespectful. Okay, so that's it for me, and ciao for now.